Welcome to our image critique for August 25th. I'm Toby.
And I'm Christina.
I just want to remind folks before we dive into critiquing this next set that there's a playlist of all of these critique videos, and you can take some time and go back through. And remember, it's not just about seeing your images critiqued. It is about hearing tips, tricks, and suggestions for making your images better. And you can certainly learn things from watching other folks as well. That playlist is linked right down below this video. We're going to dive right in and get started in just a second, but I'll remind folks that we have too many submitted to do everybody, so we have to eliminate some, and we eliminate them for various reasons. Either names we have critiqued several times in the recent past. I did ask for images within the last week this time, and we used that to eliminate some of them as well, but there were some I let slip through if we felt that they were
constructive.
Yeah, if we could add constructive things to say about them that would help everybody who was watching.
That's right.
And so we're going to just jump right to our first image from Ralph, and it's called Horsepower. All right, Ralph, you get a thumbs up for the name.
For the pun.
The title. Always good. But I'm just going to jump right in, and I would like to see a lot more separation here between horse and car. Just starting to blur into this line here and gets a little funny. Needs a little more room there.
Yep, I agree. And to me, there's not really any clear subject. You know, the car and the horse, even though the horse is out of focus, are competing for, both elements are competing in the frame. So I don't feel like this is a particularly strong image. I feel like I like the idea of the juxtaposition of the horse and the car. But, you know, if there weren't for the title, I don't believe that you could make that connection. So I feel like the image should be able to stand on its own. The message that you're trying to bring across should stand on its own without having to look at the title. Other than that, I do think that it is a nice exposure. I might be able to warm it up a little bit, but then I think that the blue that I'm seeing in the reflection of the car is just the sky, so that's pretty normal.
Yep.
But yeah, great composition, and I like the depth of field that you chose because you can still see enough detail in the horse to know that it's a horse. I feel like you could very easily open your aperture far too wide to be able to see what's in the background.
Yep. That's F5. It's shot very close with it. The only other suggestion, this little black nub, which I believe is probably a rear windshield wiper or something like that, keeps grabbing my attention because it's dark right against this sky. I think a stronger image could lay right in this area, a tighter shot that captured a little bit more of the angle of the car and the horse in the direction he was going.
Well, I think that the nub is distracting because it's really the most defined part of the car, and so our eyes gravitate to what we actually can make sense of most easily. So I think that's another reason why this image isn't that strong for me. Just because there's a lot of competing elements trying to get your attention.
Yeah. And this might also work well as a black and white. I'm just thinking about the color temperature being a little funny because of the reflections.
I feel like there are so many reflections in the car that the black and white would actually, like the red actually helps bring attention to the car because it's such a strong color. And then the black back there. But if it were all, you know, pretty monochromatic or just even grayscale, it would become a lot more confusing.
Okay, good point. Thank you, Ralph. Now another red from Nick. Red, Red Rose. I don't think we need a title for this one.
Well, so this one, I like the composition. I do worry that the top right corner is a little too dark. It almost seems like the photo itself is cut off at a strange angle. Lots of detail in this picture. The raindrops are, you know, pretty cool and in focus. It looks like you overexpose this image past the point of recovery. That's why we're getting those really white areas. So you've got to watch that in the future. And you know, make sure you look at your meter, and that, you know, if you're
Your
photographing
histogram.
one small thing, that you maybe you want to set spot metering if that's an option for you. Or yes, look at your histogram, turn on the zebra, the little
Blinkies.
blinking things that let you know when you've overexposed something. And
You might not have that available to them with a Fuji Fine Pix.
okay, that's fair.
Yep. And I don't think you can shoot raw with this Fuji Fine Pix either, which would also be able to help you pull up, you know, get a little bit more detail out of this.
Sure.
Did you want to say anything more?
I did actually.
Okay.
So this reminds me of when I shoot with my iPhone. I have no control over my exposure. It's pretty much all automatic, and I don't use any of the apps that allow me to control the exposure. I should probably get one, but I don't use it. So my suggestion for you in the future is to expose for the brightest spot of the image, or the brightest spot on the subject that you're photographing, because it's much easier to recover shadows than it is to recover highlights. So if you have, you know, a more or less even exposure, and you've just barely clipped the highlights, then you still have the ability to bring back those images. But if you clip them way too much, you overexpose part of the image way too much, then you're going to have something like this.
Yep. I think reading your description, it was fairly tricky conditions inside the rose bush with some light coming in. So with all that said, I think you've done a nice job. Some really cool colors here as we come out from the center of it. I think the real star of this photo is these points here with those dewdrops alongside of them. And maybe even just focusing in on capturing that would have given you the ability to have a more consistent exposure that wouldn't have been so challenging for the camera. I also would like to see, and I'm not repeating myself already, but a little separation from this leaf to that point. Again, if you could get down just a little bit lower to do that. Or shooting right over here with these drops on just this leaf. Again, it's brighter, but it's consistently brighter, and it wouldn't have been as challenging for the camera. But yeah, these are fantastic here. Overall, though, I think it's framed nicely. It is dark up here, but that does kind of work to frame it all within, and we can see, I think this is a thorn back here, probably much closer, and it all kind of sets the scene for this, and those are good elements that add to the image. Great, thank you, Nick. I'm not going to pronounce that. Something Moonlight. I want to pronounce it. Takomenon Moonlight. So this is a long exposure picture. How long? 30 seconds.
Very cool.
By Moonlight to illuminate the falls here, and that all works really well.
Yeah, this is a really, really cool image. It looks like there's some fog too that's catching some of the moonlight.
It might be just the mist from the falls coming up.
Yeah, it's really, really awesome.
Yep.
One, maybe two things that I might change, but really, I mean, this is just a great image. The moon is a little too hot, so in the future, I might try to do, you know, an HDR type exposure where you don't actually combine them to create an HDR image, but you take one image that is exposed for the moon, and then you take an image that exposes the rest of the scene. This way, you can combine them later in Photoshop and actually get some of the moon detail back. I actually, you know, the more I look at it, the more I do like the way that the moon, it actually, since it's so overexposed and it's so bright, it actually looks like a supermoon, because the part that looks overexposed is, you know, it's pretty perfectly circular. So, so that's really cool, I think. The other thing that stands out to me is just the top right corner, those little leaves that are peeking through. Things like that are really tough, especially, you know, when you have such a detailed sky like this to Photoshop out. And if you can't frame them out of the picture to begin with, then you just kind of have to deal with them. But overall, this is just a really, really, really cool image. I love looking at it, and I love the colors. Yeah.
I do, yeah. I think overall it's really nice. I have mixed feelings about this up here. It's not good because it is not connected to anything down here. It's just floating in. But it also kind of helps and it parallels the little bit of a Milky Way we have here.
It's true.
So, you know, that you could make arguments either way, but I think I agree with Christina that it would be a stronger image without that all sky up there, and it's tricky conditions. There's also other neat elements in here that are just kind of hiding behind this bush of probably a little swirl here, which is great, but really, really nicely composed and framed. Overall, I think it's a great image. Thank you, Charlie Cam. Luke submitted this one of the birdhouse, and here's again where I start to repeat myself. But if you came around to the right just a little bit to get a little bit of a separation from this branch and this, I think this would be a stronger image because we'd have more of a sense of it hanging from this branch. The other thing that I think you've handled fairly well here is we have fairly spotty conditions, which can be really tricky, but none of them are blown out, and so I think that is good. Other than that, it's a nice shot, and it looks like a cute little birdhouse.
Yep.
Thank you, Luke. Mac has this one, and this water is beautiful here. So this is the Rio Masadi River. We wanted to talk about this one because we produced a Think Before You Click video last week talking about leading lines, and I mentioned what's coming up is talking about framing, using elements in your image to kind of frame your image, and I think that's what Mac has tried to do here. He's got these old logs that have probably fallen across the creek or stream here, and is using those to really try to draw your viewer's eye. Mac, in this case, I don't think it works very well because they are so large and right in our face, and looking at, I mean, they really just kind of block, and I just want to see more of this green up here. That looks pretty special. Down here, not missing much, but what I think is these rocks here and those rocks there and the green all do a really nice job of already framing your subject. The way the stream is just kind of down in this valley and the color differences between the blue and this reddish rock works really nicely to frame. So I think it would be a stronger image if you'd just stepped through these and shot. What focal length were you at? You were at 18 millimeters, so pretty wide. So I think you could come through here and still capture the same and maybe even a little bit better. It looks like there might be a little bit of waterfalls coming in on the left too, which is a bit of a tease. But for your exposure here, your exposure is perfect. Really nice colors.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It sort of feels like that top tree trunk is just blocking the way. I mean, and on the one hand, it makes me wonder what else is out there, so it makes me really think about what could be out there. On the other hand, I do wish that we could see further out there, so that's probably just a redundant statement.
Thanks, Mac. Henry's got a little boy. It's very focused in black and white. So I say technically, exposure here, just perfect. Really nice. Great detail. Focus is perfect. This eye, I mean, all of this is really in focus. You can see it starts to get just a tiny bit soft over there, I think. But that's what we want to see.
Composition is great.
Composition is good. He's gazing into the frame. Henry knows
just
what's
barely.
Him up something. Just barely? Why do you say just barely? Because he's right there at the halfway point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But still.
Still. Very good.
Yeah. My only question or critique about this photo is that I feel like the black and white treatment makes it feel a little bit more melancholic than I think this moment actually was. And, you know, I'm being presumptuous because I don't actually know what was going on. But it looks like, you know, he is probably very focused and, you know, just went for a swim. But it doesn't look like he's, you know, particularly sad and I feel like that's what the black and white sort of does for this image. And that's what black and white really does for a lot of images. You know, you'll find that it's a good way to sort of, if you're trying to convey a message of like sadness or, you know, like I said, melancholy or, you know, there are obviously lots of different reasons. But yeah, but I don't know if I love the treatment on this particular image. I do like the light and you know, everything else about it.
I will say in defense of making a black and white poolside, which I'm going to assume that this is poolside, I critiqued an image while you were away of a young girl sitting by the pool, and she had a very blue cast on her. So it can be very difficult to have good color, true color images near a pool because you get a crazy blue reflection. And so that might have been one reason Henry decided to go black and white to solve that issue. I think it's fine, but I agree that you have a point in that it does add a tone to this image, a feeling that may be a little bit stronger than desired.
But that's what it does to me.
That's what it does to you. Yep. Each to their own.
To each their own.
To each their own. Great, thanks, Henry. James has Belle Isle Fountain from Detroit, Michigan. Night shoot with the photography club. That's great, getting out there with folks. 4 seconds, f11, 35 millimeter, shooting with a prime. Wonderful. So we've seen similar images to this before of night shots where we have a lot of mixed lighting. In this case, it looks like it's desired. The fountain designers have said, I want blue lights here, yellow lights here, and maybe some more blue lights up here, which I think detracts from the image some. And James, it's not necessarily anything you could do except maybe turn it black and white, but then I think it would lose some of its warmth. We'll come back to that in a second, though. First is we almost have symmetry, but not quite. We have, well, maybe we do. Is that about the same? But I'm looking at, it feels different here and here, the way the light is.
Well, it's shot from I don't think it's shot straight on. Or maybe just the monument itself is a little bit asymmetrical.
So I think this is one of those things where, similar to the double take assignment, you may step up to it and say, this is a cool thing, I want to capture all of it. And that doesn't necessarily make the strongest image, and you should pick some elements out of here to really focus in on. And I think, this detail through here with the smaller bits could make an interesting image. Maybe this top here, which really makes me think about a jellyfish. It's almost, this water is almost lost, so it's so soft from the motion blur. And this is strange here too because of the way the light is hitting the top but not the bottom. It also looks quite phallic the way it's puffed out down here. I'm sorry, it does. That's not the first thing I thought of, but I just see that now. But so this part is tough. I'm curious what a black and white looks like. I think this would be very lost in the grayscale or monochrome image. So my suggestion would be to look at elements of this that you could capture to make a stronger image versus trying to get this whole thing in because it's tricky because of the lights and the moving of the water. You might also go to a slightly faster shutter speed, like 2 seconds, so that we don't have quite as much blur, 1 second, and see what that looked like as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't think I have anything to add. I don't really mind. I know I probably confuse people because of my reasoning. I mean, for people that watch this a lot, because I have complained before about mixed lighting in some photographs, and I'm going to say that in this photograph, I don't think it's particularly bad. And I think that for me, it's the hues and of the particular colors that are in this image. Like it looks a little bit like a royal blue on, the more evenly exposed sections, and then it looks very orange on, the other color looks very orange, and those are complementary colors, so they go fairly well together. But yeah, I mean that's really my only feedback about this, that I don't mind the color differences, and I do agree with you about the composition and sort of going in and finding a more interesting viewpoint. And another cool thing another thing that might be cool to add or to think about is to add some sort of element that gives scale, that lets us know how big this is, because we don't really know how big. It could be really huge, or it could be, like average size. So it could be cool to see, to add some scale to the mix. maybe like have one of your buddies that come shooting with you like sit down and you can silhouette them against some of the brighter spots.
I like the silhouette idea. Yep. That's true.
Yeah, but thanks for submitting.
Great. Thank you, James. All right. Achintya has an Indian roost macaw. In its first attempt to capture wildlife with a prime. Very close to the monkey itself, clearly. Now, I mean, not knocking you for saying this is wildlife, because I believe in India this is wildlife, but the monkey's hanging out on your window, which, well...
It's totally wildlife.
It's totally wildlife, right, but I guess...
I wish there were monkeys hanging out in our windows.
You might not.
I do too. Monkeys are awesome.
Monkeys are awesome. I'm not going to argue with that. Okay. But here, the point is, and this is very good, you were very close to the monkey itself. So here we have a situation where there are eyes in the picture, but they are not in focus. It's that reaching hand instead. And you know what? I think that's fine. So often I say, if there's eyes in the image, they need to be in focus. But in this case, shooting with this prime, you chose a shallow depth of field really to kind of focus on the hand. I hope that was intentional as it's reaching through your window or the window here. And of course, the monkey face in the background is in focus. Wow, you shot at f8. You were very close to have that shallow of a depth of field. And I think that was great. It would have been a big mistake to go any wider, f5.6, f4, heaven forbid, f1.8, because then that monkey's face would have been very, very soft and kind of lost and similar to the comments we had on the horse berry at the beginning. Although we said that was fine, weren't we? We said that was a good aperture. Okay. So, good. Nice composition. It's kind of at this angle, and I think that works fine here because it feels like we're looking out the window, not perfectly straight on, and this monkey's reaching in. I really like this. The hand leads to the eyes. There's a lot to love about this image.
Yeah, I think that if the eyes were in focus, then the hand would become a distracting element.
Yep.
And the only thing that I will add to this is that I would like to see it in color. I mean, I think the black and white looks great, but I would just like to see what it looks like in color.
Yep. Yeah, and the eyes are right at us, and again, this is a great example of one of the few times where I could say the eyes don't need to be in focus. Thank you. Achintya. I'm sorry if I'm saying that poorly. Now we have one from this person. And we don't have a lot of music shots or band in action shots. What I find interesting about this is the kind of dichotomy here of this dude is down on the floor, looks like he is singing, and the shadow almost looks like liquid or something. And these dudes look like they're just kind of standing there, and that guy's got his hand on his face. So it feels, these guys are completely divorced from what this guy is doing, feels like, which throws me off a little. So it doesn't feel like it's right in the middle of a set that is some serious music playing going on. But we got this guy who's...
Does it have to be?
No, it doesn't have to be. But it makes me curious for the full story, and I feel like it's not a full story. It's kind of this half and half deal, which leaves me a little unsettled.
Okay.
All right.
I will say that images like this one where, you cut off, whether intentionally or not, people's heads off, and then, like you have this on the bottom right part of the image. Like typically, I would say, if this were some other subject matter, like if this was like a portrait of somebody, like a family portrait, or in any other situation where there might not be as much spontaneity as in a concert, I would say that those things do a disservice to the photograph, but in this case, I feel like the very relaxed nature, the very sort of random nature of the photo really helps to add to the tone of that like sort of chaotic moment that's happening right now. And you can tell that, I mean, it definitely looks like he's very, very into, you know, he's like really feeling the music and what he's singing. And this looks like a, you know, like a spectator. So it's very true to life in the sense that, like, if I were there, like, I could picture myself being there and looking at this exact frame. So I think that the lens choice was a good one in this case. I think that the sort of imperfect composition and imperfect sort of placing of things really complements what's happening here really well. So this is one of the few instances where, you know, I think like chaos sort of makes sense and really contributes to the photograph. Also, if his face wasn't so bright and lit as it is, if it weren't as bright as it is, I think that that would be a different story. But he's clearly the focus, and even though there are other distracting elements, I keep going back there, and my eye keeps going back to all the other elements, but not in a way that, you know, that it gets stuck anywhere.
Okay, I'll agree on technically. I think exposure, the treatment of this image all looks great, but I just keep coming back to this board guy here, and I think we would have a stronger image if he was not in it, because he's just bored looking at him, and that lessens to me what this guy's doing.
Really?
Yep.
Well, this photographer couldn't really control what that guy was doing. And then also I think it just shows that, you know, while somebody might be, well, there are people that willingly paid to come see this, and that are probably really excited about it. There's other people as part of the dynamic of this moment that are like, all right, well, this is just another job. You know, this is my job.
Okay.
So it sort of gives insight into, you know, what might be going on backstage.
Okay.
You know.
All right. Yep. Shot with the
layers.
Fuji XE1 23mm prime. Really nice combination. And does well here in this low light. So it's cool. Moving on. Thank you. Paul Bag's got a mug shot, and what I like about this is taking this picture, you discover that swans can be quite nasty. I used to live next to a pond as a child growing up that had swans, and learned very early on that you gave them a lot of room, especially when babies are around, baby swans. The males can be ferocious and chase you and bite you. Did you know that?
I didn't know. No, I didn't.
Yeah. So, you know, I think this is a nice image. The strengths of it are the great detail and the feathers and the water drops. And even though we're dealing with bright sunlight, or it looks like bright sunlight right on here, we're still not losing any detail. Very close, but not. So our exposure is really nice, and focus and framing are good because we've, again, over on the right-hand side, looking into the frame, or actually looking up at us at the camera. I almost wonder if we zoom into that, Paul, could we see you, your reflection? That might be you bumped up right there in the eye. So I think this is a nice shot, and I just wanted to call it out because I think your exposure is spot on, and some really nice detail here.
Great.
Thank you, Paul. Ian Fiorentino has some snails on dry twiggy things. These are, for your information, I'm reading, Maltese edible snails.
Where are you reading that?
Right there.
Oh, Maltese edible snails. Edible snails, wow. All right, well,
Escargot.
I think I like this image a lot. You know, one of the things that, and you can't even really tell that well, but that main snail, the one that looks to be the focus, is a little bit soft, which isn't a huge deal. But what is a little bit of a big deal to me is that there's not enough breathing room up here and there's too much room down here. So maybe crop a little bit or, you know, like tilt up and recompose. I really love the tones in this image.
Yes, that's the strength of this image.
The earthy, neutral tones are really, really, really awesome. And you know, it may have been that just that everything around you had the same sort of like very neutral earth tones, or you selectively picked that background. Because if you had shot this up against like green grass, it wouldn't have had the same effect. So I really like that about it. I think it would be, you know, if you like printed it, it would be, and you wanted to frame it and put it up somewhere, it would be really easy to be able to match it to just about, you know, any decor because of the colors.
That's something we don't often discuss when we critique images.
That's right.
How to interior decorate your home with certain images. Ian, I think you've got a nice shot here. I echo Christina's sentiment. We need a little bit more breathing room up here. I also am not crazy about this twig solidly in the foreground. Very close. Again, similar to the car and the horse, we almost have the out of focus blur touching. We want a little bit more room there. You know, I think this could work really well as a portrait orientation shot if we shifted ourselves to the left a little bit and really just kind of came up the stalk to this guy here. And a little bright too. This could be just, yeah, well, it's because it's slightly out of focus, I think, is what I'm not seeing that sharpness in the tan there. And it looks like focus was just behind the snail because we look at how sharp that twig looks behind it. And it looks just a little sharper. So, those are my suggestions. I do love the kind of monochromatic earthiness of this image. That works really nicely. Thank you, Ian. This is Steve. Millstones on Stanage Edge. So someplace over in England, I believe. Actually, maybe he said down here. Derbyshire Peak District National Park, UK. You know, this is a very nice shot. I think its composition is good. I think you could be a little bit closer to these millstones, but some really spectacular colors and lights going back here. It does feel a little oversaturated to me, especially when looking at this, where the light is coming in down here, and I can't quite tell if that's a reflection on water or some kind of foliage down there. Maybe that's just more of this heathery, heathy stuff getting lit by the light. But that's a little on the bright and a little too colorful for me. And is it a little crooked? Is the left side a little higher?
It feels a little bit crooked, yes.
This might be one of those hard cases, though, where you just have hills that lend themselves to not trying. But to me, it feels like the left side is just a tiny bit higher than the right. Or do you think it's the other way?
No. Okay. No, I agree with you. I do think that it's kind of an optical illusion and that it really is straight.
Okay.
It feels a little bit dark for me, especially because it just seems like such a burst of color. But you know, that's that's a personal choice. You know, if you really like the dark tones, that's great. I will agree with you about the saturation. It almost looks purple. I mean, is there purple on there? It doesn't feel super like this. These areas look purple to me.
They might actually be honest. Well, see, some of that I think is honestly purple. It's kind of your heather material or heather foliage.
How about like stuff over here too?
That
all looks purple as well.
Right. And the clouds, even some we're getting up in here too. You know, I know sunsets can be very colorful, but that doesn't feel 100% true to life to me.
Yeah.
And
it doesn't have to.
Maybe in Derbyshire. It's purple. No, but yeah, I think that is a hesitation of mine in saying that this is a perfect image because I think...
Here's what, I mean, I don't really know what to say that would make this image stronger because I feel like anything that I would say in relation to that would be just personal choice. And I think, you know, I think this is an image to be proud of because it's a great image. I might try in the future maybe do again an HDR type shot where you don't actually combine the photos in HDR but you expose properly for the sun and for the really, really bright highlights and then you combine them in Photoshop to just bring out the detail in the shadows and the highlights equally. Because our cameras don't have the same dynamic range that our eyes have, and sometimes we just need to help them a little bit. And I think that, taking 2 images, exposing them slightly differently, just barely to bring back, not to, combine them and make an HDR, but just to bring back detail can be really helpful, and can really help an image.
Thank you, Steve. Eduardo has got clocked framed. Now, this leads nicely into our discussion that's going to be coming out this week, I think, before you click, about using natural elements to frame your subject. In this case, the clock face. You have found a spot where the face is completely clear of any of the foreground foliage and shot straight through that, but at a nice focal length that we know what that stuff is because it's green and it's in focus enough to tell that it's leaves, but not be completely distracting and busy. And nailed it. And I think this is quite nice.
Yeah. I don't think I have any constructive.
It starts to get busy down here, but again, because of this framing, it really helps draw your eyes back up to here.
But it shows that when you have a clear subject, you can have a really busy image and still have a focus, and still, you can still find simplicity among the chaos if you use framing and if you really think about the placement of things in your photographs.
I think Eduardo just gave us our title with your help, Simplicity Among Chaos. I like that. It's good. Thank you, Eduardo. All right, and I think that is a great place to stop for this week's image critique. We'll be back next week with a handful more that were posted at the same time. We want to finish those up and talk about them. This is Toby.
And this is Christina.
Saying bye-bye for now.
Bye-bye.